8:03 p.m. The conservatory at Barton Springs blazes as if every switch has just been flipped. I'm standing by the reception desk, a sealed envelope bearing a scannable code in my hand. Inside it, a small memory card containing the electronic will and the fund's records. The edge of the seal is torn, off the tear line. I touch that tear for a second, then pull my hand back at the sound of clinking glasses and cameras clicking non-stop. My name is Ava Morgan, 31, a user experience designer. Tonight, my family is naming a scholarship fund for teachers, the Bluebonnet Educators Fund. The roster of sponsors is all here, name badges gleaming, the presentation screens running their final test. At the entrance, Celeste Hart is adjusting flowers at the photo backdrop while murmuring to the crew, "Stick to the family layout. Don't let it get messy." She's my maternal cousin, lives in Dallas, used to arranging everything to look good on camera. An hour earlier, Celeste offered to hold all the paperwork to keep it tidy, but I refused and carried the envelope myself. When I opened the coat closet to check, I saw the tear. Not along the tear line, not accidental. In 15 minutes, the program begins. This fund needs trust. The memory card in the envelope spells out the terms, governance rights, and the plan for awarding this year's teacher scholarships. One false accusation, one line of "she altered the documents," and tonight's credibility will go up in flames. I take a breath, look at the clock, look at the legal team standing near the stage, and walk straight toward Celeste. Before I continue the story, tell me which state you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe so I can tell the whole story. Comment the moment of justice that impressed you the most down below. Before I could get a word in with Celeste at the conservatory, you need to know why I didn't hand that envelope to her from the start. My Morgan family isn't the type that talks big and does little. My father, Robert, is a retired music teacher who still keeps the habit of tuning former students' instruments whenever they stop by. He has an old metronome on the shelf. Every evening after dinner, he winds it for a few minutes, as if to remind the whole family to keep a steady tempo in life. He taught for 40 years, led the school band, judged inter-school competitions, and each graduation season wrote congratulatory cards by hand to every child whose name he remembered. My mother, Elaine, runs an independent bookstore called Bluebonnet Books on a corner with a big oak tree. She hosts Saturday Story Hour for little kids, invites local authors for signings, and during Banned Books Week, always sets up a special shelf so people can read and share their own thoughts. The register in the shop is still the simple kind, with a handwritten price list hanging next to a cup of pencils. She doesn't like showiness, and she likes those thank you plaques placed for nice photo angles even less. My older brother, Ethan, is a civil engineer who goes to work in a reflective vest and hard hat. He talks about concrete, bridge abutments, construction permits, and always knows what time traffic jams hit so he won't be late driving his kid. His son, Max, is 6, loves Lego and baseball. Max often leaves his small glove on the dining table after practice, and you'll see Ethan washing dishes while asking whether his son has memorized his spelling words yet. My younger sister, Nora, is a pediatric nurse. Nora speaks bluntly, remembers every dosage and every vaccination at the community clinic, and would never tolerate anyone beating around the bush. She has the habit of stuffing bandages into her coat pocket whenever she goes to a party because some kid is bound to take a spill. In our family, Nora asks the pointed questions: who holds the money? Who signs? Who's responsible? Celeste Hart is a cousin on my mother's side. She lives in Dallas, comes from a well-off family, and always peppers her speech with, "Let me coordinate," to make it more professional, so it looks good on camera. Celeste likes to refresh the maternal side's charitable activities, change names, change logos, put up photo backdrops, call the local press. Once, when the family donated books to my father's old school library, Celeste printed a giant heart-giving circle backdrop and put it in front of the bookcase, while the small plaque reading, "Donated by the Morgan family," was shoved into a corner. My mother took it down and put it back at children's eye level. Another time, at a back-to-school gift distribution for teachers, Celeste said to drop cash envelopes and replace them with gift cards with scannable codes, printed with the name of the coordinating entity, to manage the image. My father said nothing, just reorganized the recipient list and handed out each envelope as promised. Tonight's fund is the Bluebonnet Educators Fund, named after my mother's bookstore, aimed at teachers in the counties around Austin. Our family agreed. Keep it small and clear so teachers know what they're receiving, from whom, and when. My father wanted bylaws written item by item. My mother wanted a dedicated line for teachers' questions. Ethan proposed transparent payment infrastructure. Nora demanded an additional policy prioritizing understaffed schools. My role was to compile the files, review the text, prepare the presentation deck and the registration forms. Everything was on the USB inside the envelope sealed with a QR code. This would be simple if not for Celeste's "let me speak first" for professionalism, edging into recent meetings. She wanted to rename the fund Lone Star Teaching Fellows by Ava Morgan, wanted a photo backdrop with eye-catching patterns, wanted to give the opening remarks from center stage, and wanted to hold all the paperwork so it doesn't get messy. You'll ask why we didn't say it plainly from the start. We did. Nora was the bluntest. Every promise to teachers needs to be written into the bylaws. Don't let anyone trim it. My mother was gentler. Let's keep our focus on books and classrooms. My father only reminded us, don't make noise. Do it right. Ethan spelled out the process for receiving funds and verification, and I arranged everything, marked each item, and added a support phone number for teachers to call. Even so, at this afternoon's sound check, Celeste still proposed consolidating all the communications items under one roof with her team. I refused, polite but firm. When I hung my coat in the closet, I checked the envelope and saw the edge of the seal torn crooked. I didn't draw a conclusion yet, but I understood that from now on everything had to follow an even tighter process. Keep the envelope within sight, notify the legal team standing near the stage, and, if necessary, open the seal in the presence of the organizers. That's when I turned, looked toward the photo area where Celeste was directing the crew, and walked over without losing a minute. Because every minute here is tied to the fund's credibility, and to the respect owed to the people who will be in their classrooms tomorrow morning. If you still remember the edge of the seal torn crooked off the tear line, that was only the first sign. The second sign came from the run of show I had written and printed this morning. I clipped it to a clipboard, pinning each item down by the minute. Welcoming guests, introductions, my parents' remarks, the tribute to teachers, the fund announcement, then inviting the sponsors on stage. While I was testing the mic with the sound team, the MC handed me their phone to show me a string of messages from Celeste. Move my segment to the top. The sponsors are waiting. The message was sent privately to the MC, without informing the organizers. I looked at the clock. Just over 20 minutes until the program began. I told the MC calmly, stick to the approved schedule. If there are changes, we need the signature of the person in charge. The MC nodded, but I knew that wasn't the end of it. Right after that, my inbox pinged repeatedly. Celeste sent a new email, CCing most of the relatives on my mother's side, including people not involved in running the fund. Subject line: urgent update to make the event more professional. The content emphasized a black tie garden dress code effective tonight. Time sent, 19 minutes before the event started. I looked up and around. Some of my parents' acquaintances were in cocktail dresses, others in shirts and blazers. A retired teacher wore a baseball cap because it was still windy. I went straight to the reception desk and asked them to quickly print a sign. Attire per the original invitation. No new requirements. Reception nodded and placed the sign at the entrance. I don't like making things hard at the last minute, especially when our guests are teachers, parents, and friends. Before I could catch my breath, catering called me over to the auxiliary kitchen. The manager reported that someone had just requested changing the main course to pan-seared salmon and a fruit salad for a lighter look. I asked who had requested it. They showed me the email. The sender was Celeste, using the phrase, "Mom and Dad want to change it to fit the spirit of the event." I called my mother over to check. She looked at me and said very clearly, "I didn't change anything." My father shook his head as well. I went back to catering. Keep the original menu per the contract. Any changes without confirmation from me or the venue representative are invalid. The manager noted it and canceled the change. I thanked them, then added a note. If there are change requests, please contact me at my number. I replied to Celeste's email in the same thread, keeping a polite tone. All changes must go through the proper point person. Please pause. The speeches were tampered with too. From the venue printer, I saw an opening speech with Celeste's name on the top line, and below it the phrase, "On behalf of Robert and Elaine." The ink was still warm. I brought that printout to my mother. She read it, frowned, then slid it back into the folder. Handle it by the book. I photographed the printout and saved it to the event folder. I knew I would need it later. In the middle of running back and forth, I had to return to the memory table, a table displaying photos of teachers, a few old yearbooks, and a tray of stamps for guests to sign. During the mic check, I had set the QR sealed envelope temporarily on this table, right next to a framed photo of the school band my father used to lead. I checked again. The envelope was still there, but slightly shifted. I opened my task app and noted clearly, "Carry the envelope on me after 7:45 p.m. The small boxes containing the fun packets to hand out to school representatives were placed in a cabinet compartment near the stage. Per the venues and event companies' rules, each box had a scannable insurance tag to control against loss. Security did a sweep. The scanner beeped steadily. I asked them to note the number of times the cabinet was opened and the name of the person who opened it in case of disputes. Celeste appeared at the photo area, adjusted a ribbon, then leaned to the photographer. "Make sure to shoot me presenting the placard to the sponsor first." I heard it clearly. I walked over and placed the stamped program schedule in her hand. "The program follows this order. If you want to speak, that segment comes after my parents' remarks. This is the approved version." Celeste smiled and murmured, "The sponsors are waiting." I replied, "The sponsors have received the schedule and confirmed this order." I didn't raise my voice. I simply pointed to the front row, where the sponsor representatives were talking with my father. They smiled, holding the programs I'd handed out. I turned to the MC. "Start right at 8:03. No changes." The cracks before go time lined up one after another. Private messages, CC all family emails, last-minute dress code changes, a menu swap, printing a speech under borrowed names. I gathered them all in one place: screenshots, printouts, venue confirmations, and the name of the person responsible. I didn't want to defeat anyone in the family. I only wanted the right roles, the right tasks, and to keep the promises we made to the teachers who would receive the scholarships. As the clock ticked forward by a minute, I held the QR-sealed envelope close to my chest, nodded to security, and signaled the MC. The program had to run in the set order, because that was the only way to keep this evening standing firm. Do you remember that I placed the stamped program into Celeste's hand and signaled the host to start on time? Right after that moment, Celeste walked over to the memory table, saying she wanted to help inventory the document boxes before the opening. I nodded but required that it be done together with 2 volunteers at the reception desk and with a venue staff member standing by. She nodded, smiling very confidently. I checked each small sealed box, cross-checking the recipient list. As I bent down to sign the handover log, I caught, out of the corner of my eye, Celeste's hand gliding over the QR-sealed envelope. The sticker along the edge of the envelope was off by 0.5 millimeter, the stamp border no longer aligning the way it had when I checked. Celeste said, "All set. I'm going over to the coat check to do a bit more checking." Then slipped down the corridor toward the cloakroom, where there's a counter for handing in and retrieving numbered tags. I asked for the envelope back and put it into my crossbody bag. The rest I left as is. I had prepared one measure since early afternoon, after seeing too many last-minute change requests. I split the contents into 2 parts. The presentation deck for projection was copied to a separate memory card, given to the sound and light team to keep in a locked cabinet with 2 witnesses. The one containing the fund terms and the electronic will was sealed and registered in the venue manager's log. The envelope placed at the memory table contained only a non-binding summary. If someone wanted to check something right at the display table, what they touched would not be the operative documents. I did not say this to Celeste. I just wanted the evening to proceed as promised to the teachers sitting in the middle rows. When the clock flipped to 8:03, the MC had barely picked up the mic when Celeste quickly stepped onto the stage and took it with a practiced motion, as if she had rehearsed. "Hello everyone, I'm Celeste, co-host tonight. So glad the sponsors have turned out in full," she said, voice steady, her smile aimed straight at the cameras. The MC looked over at me. I signaled for him to stand aside, not to tussle midstream. Celeste continued about the fundraising campaign coordinated by my team, thanked a few big names, and called for a round of applause. In the front row, the sponsor representatives glanced toward my father, looking a bit puzzled. My mother shifted in her seat. I stepped to the edge of the stage and told the MC, "Once she stops, read from the original script." As the MC was about to regain the rhythm, Celeste suddenly stopped, gestured toward the memory table, and said loud enough for the entire conservatory to hear, "Wait, there's an emergency. The memory card containing the electronic will and the fund terms has disappeared." She turned and pointed straight at me. Ava was the last one holding it. The amplified sound startled a few guests. A group of teachers chatting quietly fell silent. People from the church community lining the aisle stopped. Someone raised a hand to their mouth. Several phones went up. I clearly heard the whispers. "If the documents are lost, how can the fund be announced? Is there a legal problem?" My heart pounded. But I didn't argue. I didn't say, "That's not true." I didn't bring up who wrote the script, who sent last-minute emails. I walked straight up the steps, held out my hand for the mic from the MC, faced the hall, and spoke clearly. "We'll pause the program for 2 minutes to carry out the lost item protocol per the venue rules. No one needs to search anyone's bag." I turned to the venue manager standing near the door. "Please temporarily secure the memory table area and the coat check. Have the current state photographed, note the time, and designate 2 witnesses." He nodded, called 2 staff members over, and put barrier tape around the display table. I invited 1 sponsor representative and 1 representative from the church community to stand as witnesses. "Thank you both." I turned to the sound and light team. "Please switch to a standby screen, no further playback." The screen cut the slideshow and displayed, "Please wait a moment." I told the MC, Read a brief announcement. This is a standard step. It doesn't mean there's been wrongdoing. He nodded and did it word for word. I asked security to bring the backstage and coat check access logs. Please note who has passed through in the last 15 minutes. A staffer ran the scanner over the cabinet containing the document boxes, sweeping each attached tracking tag. The beeps were steady. The cabinet hadn't been opened since the pre-show check. I asked them to record the time and the person who scanned. Celeste stood a few steps away, still holding a backup mic. She said, "I'm only concerned about transparency. Without the memory card, tonight can't proceed." I looked straight at her. The memory card for the projection is being kept in the sound and light team's locked cabinet with 2 witnesses. It can be checked immediately. The legal documents are never left on the display table. They are sealed and registered in the venue manager's log. If needed, we'll break the seal in front of the parties, in order. I spoke loud enough for the middle rows to hear, but without raising my voice. An older teacher sitting near my mother exhaled softly. My mother nodded when the manager brought over the log. He pointed to the 645 signature line. My name, his name, the seal code. "The documents are still in the office safe," he said. I proposed, "Please have the 2 witnesses accompany you. Open the safe. Confirm the seal status. No need to bring anything on stage. We'll follow protocol and keep things quiet." I turned back to the hall. "Just 2 minutes. Please stay seated, have some water, chat quietly. No one will have their bags searched. No one will be named." During those brief 2 minutes, I kept my eyes on the room, my hand resting on the edge of my crossbody bag that held the envelope with the shifted label. I had seen what I needed to see: the swapped label, the route to the coat check, and an opening moment hijacked. The rest would be paperwork, signatures, and confirmations. Not back-and-forth accusations, not searches. We would continue the evening as promised, only after everything was done properly. If you remember, we paused for 2 minutes according to protocol. It was in those very 2 minutes that everything began to come into focus, layer by layer. The venue manager brought the coat check ledger to the signing table. He set down the pen, flipped to tonight's page, and pointed to the line near 1935. The person who checked a garment bag was Celeste Hart. The signature was hers, hook number 214. My name did not appear on any entry. I asked him to read it aloud so both witnesses could hear clearly, then requested a copy to be attached to the event file. I did not grill anyone. I simply verified the paperwork. Next came the tracking of the tags attached to the fun packaging. The venue has a tag scanning system at several entry and exit points to prevent loss. Security set the reader on the table and pulled up tonight's log. The first line shows 1922 in the lounge area, right when Celeste was talking with the sponsor group. The next line, 1931, is at the memory table, where I had seen the envelope label askew. And at 1937, the signal hits the coat check, just before Celeste stepped onto the stage. I asked that these 3 timestamps be recorded with the operator's signature. I made it clear to the entire room: this is the venue's log, applied to all items with attached tags. We are not relying on cameras. The sound team brought the console next to the stage to avoid running back and forth. The technician read the mic log. The device labeled CELH1 turned on at 1940. 2 minutes earlier, at 1938, this mic was muted due to backstage movement. That moment coincides with the tag signal appearing at the coat check. I asked the technician to print a summary, sign it, and give it to the venue manager to clip together with the coat check ledger. Everything had witnesses. No one was asked to open personal bags, and no one was named beyond what was written in the logs. From the bar, the cashier brought over a time-stamped printout of tonight's receipts. The line at 1936 reads, "Topo Chico plus lime, paid with a card in the name of Celeste Hart. The bar sits right at the edge of the lounge looking toward the coat check entrance. I thanked the staffer and asked that the printout be attached to the file. This shows that Celeste was in the correct area when the tag signal appeared at 1937. I did not say this was incriminating evidence. I merely connected the timestamps. Correct location, correct signatory. A florist on the setup team, belonging to no one's family, raised her hand to speak. She gave her name and company, then said that around 1930 she saw Celeste bend over the memory table to fix a gift box. I remember because I was retaping a ribbon that had come loose at that moment, she said. I asked the MC to record her name and phone number in the minutes and thanked her for stepping forward as a witness. Once the timestamps were clear, I asked the venue manager and the two witnesses to go with him to the office, open the safe, and check the seal on the legal document set we had deposited since 1845. They were gone for 3 minutes and returned with a status report. Seal intact. Code matching the ledger. No signs of opening. I read out clearly to the hall. The legal documents are secure. The presentation materials are in the tech team's locked cabinet. Nothing has disappeared from the system. I looked toward Celeste. You just stated that the will USB has gone missing. To resolve this thoroughly, let's return to the coat check. We moved together to the counter, the manager, the MC, the two witnesses, and Celeste. I said very clearly, "This is your property. If you agree, please allow us to open garment bag number 214 to check and cross-reference with the ledger." Celeste hesitated a beat, then nodded. The staff brought out the bag, read the hook number, and matched the signature. The bag was opened right on the counter, not taken to a private room, so that everything would be transparent. Inside, in the outer pocket, was a QR-sealed envelope identical to the type used for the summary packet. The edge seal had been peeled and re-adhered. The manager looked to me for guidance. I nodded. He recorded the time, described the envelope's condition, and the fact that it was found in bag number 214 checked in by Celeste. I did not touch the envelope. I let him reseal it with a spare venue seal and place it in a temporary evidence box according to the standard lost property procedure. Back on stage, I summarized briefly for the hall. The coat check ledger shows Celeste as the person who checked the bag. The tag attached to the fund packaging appeared at the lounge, the memory table, then the coat check in sequence at 1922, 1931, 1937. Celeste's mic was turned on at 1940, having been muted 2 minutes earlier during movement. The 1936 bar receipt establishes location. An independent witness confirmed seeing Celeste adjust a box on the display table, and a resealed envelope was found in Celeste's garment bag at the coat check. "We are not using the dining room cameras," I said. "We are using paperwork, the venue's logs, and witnesses." Celeste started to speak, but I handed the mic to the venue manager. He verbally confirmed everything, then announced that the envelope would be retained under the lost property procedure to be handed over after the event. I turned to the sponsor representatives and the teachers. "We will return to the program in the approved order. The fund presentation proceeds as planned." The MC picked up the thread, and the whole hall relaxed. There was scattered applause. Then it grew steady. I looked at the clock. 8:11. We still had enough time to do exactly what we had promised, with full documentation and witnesses standing by. No arguments needed. No need to look for cameras. Just do it the right way. When the clock hit 8:11 and the program fell back into step, people applauded the first fund presentation. Thank you cards went around, the teachers received their packets, and signed the list. That night wrapped up far more peacefully than 5 minutes earlier, but the story didn't end on stage. The next morning, we met at Bluebonnet Books. Mom brewed a large pot of coffee, Dad sat at the register with the old metronome set beside him. Ethan stopped by after dropping Max off at school, and Nora, having gotten off shift early, was there right away. Celeste arrived 5 minutes late holding a bottle of mineral water. No one wanted to drag things out, so I put the file folder on the table and said straight out, "We need to resolve this clearly so last night doesn't repeat." The family attorney had already prepared a public apology letter, brief, and addressing exactly the actions that required taking responsibility. It spelled out the unsanctioned program changes, the last-minute emails, the handling of the sealed envelope, and the unassigned speech. The apology was directed to the teachers, sponsors, church community, and family. The letter did not shift blame or hedge. Celeste read it once, fell silent, then nodded. Mom handed over a pen. Celeste signed right at the counter, in front of us and a notary the attorney had brought. The signed copy was posted on the fund's website. Several copies were printed and set at the bookstore counter. And it was attached to an email sent to the sponsors and schools that attended. Next came the accompanying responsibilities. We didn't want to punish just to get it over with. We wanted to aim at what would be useful to the community. Celeste agreed to donate to the fund, unconditionally, at the level recorded by the attorney in an addendum. That amount goes directly to this year's teacher scholarships, allocated by the small board. At the same time, Celeste registered for 120 hours of community service at the East Austin Literacy Center. The schedule was set for weekends and several evenings, shelving books, assisting adult reading classes, tutoring reading for newly arrived children, and taking part in the center's used book fundraising day. A timesheet sat on the table. Each shift ended with a signature on a line. Not for social media pictures, just to make sure the work was actually done. We had one final condition, a non-disparagement commitment. Both sides signed a simple, easy-to-understand agreement. No false statements, no making things up, no using social media to attack the family or the fund. If there are questions about process, bring them to the small board. Don't air them outside. Celeste put pen to paper, looked at my mother, and said softly, "I understand." Mom nodded. "What matters is doing it right from now on." Boundaries within the family were also redrawn clearly. Celeste would not participate on the fund's coordinating board for the time being. All fund decisions go through a small board consisting of Mom, Elaine, Dad, Robert, me, a teacher representative elected by the schools, and a sponsor representative nominated by the supporter group. We meet monthly at the bookstore, publish meeting notes on the website, and post a copy on the church bulletin board. The content centers on scholarship proposals, disbursement schedules, upcoming events, and feedback from teachers who have received support. There is no brand image agenda item, and no nebulous co-chair position. Who does what is recorded clearly in the minutes? The community responded quickly as well. The parish priest called my father after lunch to say that from now on, for public church events, Celeste would no longer be in charge of emceeing or sequencing the program. The church wants to focus on the purpose of the gathering, honoring teachers, praying for the school year, and introducing students who need mentoring. The high school where my father used to teach sent an email thanking us for the evening and asking how teachers could apply for the next round of scholarships. They proposed a small talk on classroom management skills for new teachers and said they were willing to provide a classroom on Wednesday evenings. No one mentioned a crisis anymore. People only asked, "When do applications open?" Over the following week, we posted the scholarship eligibility list, opened the application form, and laid out the scoring method. Ethan helped me reorganize the frequently asked questions section. Nora added a hotline for teachers not yet comfortable with computers. Mom placed a small donation box next to the register, listing the basic cost per scholarship. Dad continued writing handwritten cards to the teachers who had offered feedback, thanking them for their patience during a high-pressure evening. Celeste began her first shift at the Literacy Center, shelving books by subject, labeling, and the next afternoon tutoring reading for a group of adults newly working the night shift. The shift lead reported back, "On time, work seriously." We noted it. No loud praise, no harping. On Sunday, after Mass, the apology letter was read briefly before the congregation, no dramatics. The church coordinator reiterated the fund's purpose, how to apply, and the invitation to the Community Reading Day at the East Austin Center. A few people asked me about the second disbursement event. I gave them the projected date and invited them to come. On the way home, Dad wound the metronome, its hand ticking steadily. Mom opened the drawer, took out the small board file, and added a yellow divider tab. Community feedback. I sat down to update the website, adding a transparency section with the necessary files. No one talked about who was right or wrong anymore. We talked about teachers needing classroom supplies, students needing books, and how to keep the thank you note stretching from season to season. That night, when we locked up the bookstore, I checked email. The apology letter had been opened more than 1,000 times. 17 applications had been started in the form. The Literacy Center reported that Celeste had signed up for an additional Saturday afternoon shift. I turned off the lights, pulled the door shut, and thought about the upcoming fund presentation. Not to get back at anyone, only to keep the promise, do it right, do it clearly, and put the teachers and students at the center. After the apology letter was posted and the first scholarship applications began to come in, I understood one thing very clearly. Getting it handled wasn't the end. We needed to establish new habits so everyone could move forward together. My father, Robert, took out the old sheet music he used to teach the school band. He wiped down the music stands, tuned the instruments, and opened a small rehearsal in the church fellowship room every Monday evening. He didn't give speeches. He simply invited a few music teachers, handed each one a score, tapped the beat, and reserved the last 10 minutes for them to share what their classes were lacking. I collected those notes and sent them to the fund's small board every Tuesday. My mother, Elaine, held reading nights at Bluebonnet Books twice a month on the first and third Thursday evenings. The shop turned off its sign earlier than usual, but inside it was bright enough. The wooden tables were arranged in a circle, and water, coffee, and cookies were set out on trays. She invited teachers to bring a book they wanted to recommend to colleagues, or a difficulty from their classroom. We took down names and emails, handed out scholarship information sheets, and how to ask the fund for support. No dense photo taking, no oversized logos. People sat close together, spoke just loud enough to be heard, then left on time. My part was Design for Dignity, a very concrete workshop on note-taking, preserving evidence, and working with a venue's systems. I built 3 modules. The first covers timeline-based note-taking, how to title for easy retrieval, and how to attach receipts. The second covers handing off items, who receives, where, at what time, and what signatures. The third is how to communicate schedules clearly with sponsors and organizers to avoid misunderstandings. I pre-printed slim handbooks with sample tracking sheets and vetted change notices. The first session had 9 people. The next rose to 15. Most of them teachers who also handle extracurricular activities. I didn't teach them to suspect anyone. I taught them to anchor themselves to proper paperwork so no one gets steamrolled. Ethan and Max turned the bookstore into a Sunday meeting spot. Father and son came after Mass, took turns choosing children's books and sports stories, sat in the green rug corner to read for half an hour, then stopped by the counter to ask my mother for a few titles for the coming week. Ethan helped me put in an extra low shelf so children could reach for themselves. The family atmosphere felt lighter than before. There were no more evasive remarks, and no more irritation born of misunderstandings. Anyone with an opinion put it straight into the meeting notebook. Anyone with a personal matter chose an appropriate time to speak privately, rather than letting it spill into events. Nora was still the straight talker. At the end of each reading night, she stood up to offer one short reminder. Harmony does not mean silence in the face of what's wrong. If a situation is murky, name the issue correctly. Cite the right section, bring it to the right place. She set up an anonymous text hour on Wednesday evenings for teachers or parents to send in concerns. She filtered the incoming list, prioritized it by urgency, and passed it to me and Mom. There were no personal recriminations at the gatherings. Only the question, how do we make it clearer next time? In the weeks that followed, the regular schedule kept everything on track. Dad played the old school march again. Teachers smiled as they remembered their students. Mom stamped received on proposal slips and set a reply date. I compiled transparency reports and updated the website. Ethan brought Max on time. Nora monitored the suggestion inbox. No one wanted noise. We wanted the teachers to have a place to come, someone to listen, and a way to make everyday support a habit. That's what keeps the fund alive through practical work, not flashy showcases. After a few steady weeks with my father's music class, my mother's reading night, the Design for Dignity workshop, and Ethan and Max's Sunday afternoons on the green rug, I realized we had moved from patching mistakes to building. Tonight, after finalizing the list for the first round of scholarships, I left the bookstore, crossed the bridge, and stopped by the shore of Lady Bird Lake. The breeze was cool, the water flat, the city lights reflected like dots marking a path. I opened my bag, took out the properly sealed envelope, checked the seal once more, then brought it to the fund's office, placed it in the safe, recorded the time, and signed my name. There was no noise, only the familiar steps of the work. What I took away is very clear. Evidence beats noise. Logs, records, receipts, and signatures help us resolve the right matter, with the right person, at the right time. Keeping harmony does not mean staying silent in the face of what's wrong. It means everyone knows the procedure, everyone follows the agreed steps, and if there's a hitch, we handle it with facts, without blame shifting. When the truth is clear and presented fairly, the community adjusts trust and roles on its own. Those who should step back, step back. Those who should step up, and resources return to where they're needed most, the classroom and the students. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this story. If you find value in a way of working based on evidence and respect, leave a comment to tell me what your poetic justice moment was. The timeline log, the RFID record, the microphone log, or the bar receipt? I would really like to read your thoughts. If the story resonates with you, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the upcoming journeys of healing. See you in the next videos. Goodbye.